I recently learned that my hobby and my wife's hobby really aren't that far apart. We both like collecting tools and supplies, and that using those tools and supplies is an entirely separate hobby. Over on the bench over here, I've got tools that I've collected over time. Some I've used a lot, some I've never used. Let's talk about the ones that have brought me the most value and the ones that haven't, to help save you some money along the way. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not a tool snob. Use whatever tools make sense for you, work for you, get the job done. As long as things get fixed, that's really the part that matters. Out of all these tools, how do I pick which ones have been the most beneficial to me? Simple. These three sets of pliers, or more accurately, pliers and wire cutter, have been probably the things that have saved my gripper. I've had a lot of years of abuse on my gripper. It's not what it used to be. These are the Torx multiplying variety. So they multiply how much squeeze you give it, and they have been exceedingly useful. Haven't used the lineman jaws near as much as the needle nose, but being able to hold on to something confidently when my hands may not be having a good day has been fantastic. Also, I love using the wire cutters and the Torx multiplying. You grab hold of something heavy like you're doing electrical in the garage, who knows what. Being able to chunk through three of them without hurting yourself has been really nice. Okay, I may be a wimp, I get it, but these have been darn useful. Now let's talk about one that I've never actually used. You may have seen those sockets that have little needles in them that push into it, so that way it can adapt to a large number of different styles of fastener. I'm pretty sure that my kids got this for me for Father's Day, like, hey, that looks like fun, let's get it for Daddy. Cool. I add it to my collection, and I haven't actually ever used it, but when the day comes, I will certainly remember that my kids got it for me. You've seen these everywhere. I actually got these pretty early on in my playing with cars. The ratchet wrenches, especially the ones that have the reversible flipper-do there, they have been probably my most used wrench in the entire garage, and with good reason. They're quick, they're efficient, they just flat out work. Gearwrench is the one that I would recommend here. I did get given a set of the Pittsburgh Harbor Freight ones that are the straight. They do work. Those are in my backup set. If I'm going to go somewhere, those are the ones I'm going to take because they're better than nothing. But get yourself a set of ratchet wrenches. These things will save mountains of time, and they're just easy. They work. And if you're feeling like you want to splurge, get the stubby set too. Now for a couple that based on the marks on these things, I've never actually used. I have some rounded off Fastener Extractors. Now, for the right application, these are going to work very nicely. They also make them for removing stripped out screw heads. But in my experience, when I get to this point, I'm cutting the fastener off. I'm hitting it with a cutoff wheel, a sawzall, whatever it takes. By the time they get this far gone, they're coming off with brute force. Can't be tight if it's liquid. That's one of the methods here. So as nice as these may be to have around, I've never actually found a use for them. Drop a comment if you've actually used these and with good success. If you've ever seen these like keychains of Allen wrenches and Torx bits, I would probably pass on these little guys unless you're really in a pinch. Plus, the hardware comes out, falls apart, and it makes a mess. What you ought to do instead is get the ones that are socket-based. Torx, hex head, metric, and SAE. Going this road, man, I've never actually used those since I picked these up, just haven't had it to. Weird tool that I don't use very often, but when I do, they're the right ones. They're a socket with a wobbly right up there near the head. Most of the time I'm using like socket extension wobbly, but when you need to have the wobbly right next to the socket, these work out quite nice. These happen to be the Pittsburgh Harbor Freight ones, but they work out okay for whenever I use them. I mean, realistically, you're never putting that much torque to them when you're in there at a funny angle, so these work out pretty good. Let's talk about socket wrenches. This is one of those weird ones that I thought would be more useful than it is, but I almost never use it. But I've got it if I need it. Tell me if this doesn't make your brain go, huh? What it is 3/8 on one side, quarter on the other, the reverser. But when you flip sides, if you're going 3/8 and quarter, it messes with your brain just a little bit because you're like, wait, hold on, it was this way on the other side. Yeah, it's backwards. The thing that makes this harder to use than anything else is the gears in there is so coarse and takes a lot more force to turn than you would like, especially on 1/4 inch fasteners. Usually the ratchet should be fairly light. This one's kind of heavy, a little bit clunky. This may be one of those ones you throw in the truck just because it could be useful someday, and you've got both if you ever need it. The next ones are essential. If you don't have these, you need them. You need the multi-little jaw clipper thingy picker-upper of everythingness, and a magnet. If you don't have these, add them to your collection. If you've already got one, add like 3 more of these because they always get lost. This goes into the realm of interesting things that you have that may not get used very much. If you don't have some, you're probably going to use them at some point. And that is feeler gauges. I'm a machinist by trade, so I probably have more sets than I could ever reasonably use. But for everything from checking to make sure that parts are seated down, running a thin feeler gauge along the edge, setting valve lash, spark plug gapping, there's a lot of uses for feeler gauges. And some of them even have the nice little wire arrangements in there, which are very nice for spark plugs. These things are a lifesaver. You can even get them with a brass, which makes them non-marking in the event that something gets pinched on them. It's not a big deal. So, some sacrificial ones with the brass leafs, as well as the stainless ones. Oh goodness, it's cold and these haven't been apart in a while. Okay, you get the idea. These next ones kind of fall in the diagnostic territory. If you don't have a good voltmeter, get one. It doesn't have to be a Fluke. It can be another brand. This is a Craftsman. It's a Fluke variant, but I love the thing to death. I've had it for more than 20 years. Solid piece. There's a lot of good ones on Amazon currently. And if you're doing some diagnostics and you have the key on, you're going to need a battery charger. I've got like 3 or 4 of these things, and I keep various cars on them at various points through the year. During the wintertime, my wife's convertible stays on a charger. Just get yourself a couple of these little guys. They are very useful. Now, scan tool related, I realize that this may be a hair overkill for some, but this is the Topdon Artidiag 900 BT. This lets me do live data. This lets me do bi-directional stuff. This is a lot of things that my new stuff can severely benefit from that I now don't have to take to someone else. Typically, I deal with old stuff, but if you're working with new stuff, you need to get yourself a good scan tool. And I've got a deal with Topdon that can get you 10% as long as you use my code through my link. Check that down in the description, and you can get yourself some very high-quality scan tools and diagnostic equipment through Topdon. All right, you ready for my favorite tool that I've never used? This thing! I don't know what it's for. I've never actually found a use for it. This is a Tite Reach. Basically, it's got a chain in it and a couple of gears, and the idea is that you're able to reach back in there and use a socket wrench on this side and tighten or loosen something on this side. I've had this in my toolbox for a very long time. If you look real close, you can kind of see the wear marks where all it does is slide back and forth in the drawer. This is one of those tools that I absolutely had to have, thinking this is going to be so useful for so many different things. It's not. It really isn't. I've tried to use it, but it doesn't actually work. It doesn't work for what I've tried. It has this nice little adapter so that way you can change the sides. You can have your socket wrench on this side. Hey, I know how to do this. Hey, remember that two-sided socket wrench? Yep. So the idea is you're able to go back and forth on a distance, but I've just never actually found a use for it, because if I can get that in there, I can usually get a normal socket wrench in there and get things off. And if I can't get a normal socket wrench in a socket, a ratchet wrench gets in there just fine. So, interesting tool. I had to have it. I've never used it. Don't bother with this thing unless you want to, at which point there's probably going to be a link for this in the description too. An honorable mention, big tubing cutter. I know this isn't the biggest one in the whole wide world, but if you got to do battery cables, AN fittings, and lines, just get one of these. It is so much easier than trying to use a cutoff wheel, a bandsaw, a who knows what. Just get the right tool. They're really not that much money in the overall scheme of things, and they're very nice to have. One more honorable mention. You're going to say, what the heck? Those look like normal socket wrench extensions. Well, they're not. They actually have a little knurl along the shaft, which makes it very convenient to have a socket on the end to reach in and to be able to articulate or move or manipulate the extension. I've used these a lot. I picked these up at a farm store. I may have been a Tractor Supply. I don't remember. They were marked down on clearance. I needed a set of extensions for I was away from my normal toolbox setting, so I just grabbed them. And you know something? I reach for these first because that knurl is so darn convenient to be able to thread something in nicely and have good grip when things may be oily. Let's talk about tool organizers last. Everybody has the magnetics parts dishes. These are nice. Take them with you. Put a few things in there except for non-ferrous stainless steel pipe plugs. They're not magnetic, so that's fun. Those useful, but the problem is sometimes you get dropped on them. The things happen, the magnet comes off, and you have to glue them back on, whatever. So I got this US General rubbery one. I've seen them on Amazon at a whole bunch of different suppliers. These are nice, but they collect dust like no tomorrow, and they're just not the best. The thing I do like about this is you've got little individual pockets for things, spots that you can put a socket and it stands up, doesn't roll away. That is convenient. I like that. I don't hate this, but I don't exactly love it. This one, though, this is probably my favorite one that I most recently learned from a professional mechanic friend, the muffin tin. Use the cheap muffin tins to be able to sort hardware. Get the half dozen, get the dozen muffin pan. It doesn't matter. This is really nice. But, don't use the one that says Wilton from the kitchen. Your wife will be mad at you. Don't ask me how I know. Really, I didn't steal hers, I promise. So anyways, the muffin pans, very useful. Hit them with brake clean when you're done. They're fantastic. They're easy to clean, and they're cheap. If one gets smashed, you don't care. You go get another one. Hit the thrift store. I'm sure these are a dime a dozen in the thrift stores. So that's my stuff for work holding, hardware holding. These are fantastic, each in their own way. Get the ones that make sense for you. Probably get these guys because they're cheap and useful, and you can stick magnets to the bottom, make them magnetic. Options are limitless with this guy. So I want to hear from you. Which of these do you not have in your tool collection, or maybe you do? Which ones do you have? Which ones do you want? Drop a comment below. I want to hear from you guys. What's your favorite? What's the one that made you go, I could use that? It was probably the muffin tin, wasn't it? Had to be the muffin pan. The muffin pan, definitely. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Let's get out to the garage and go build some cool cars.